Good evening, everyone. My name is Apurva. I'm the founder and director of Animal Law and Policy Network, also known as ALPN Research Foundation. That's our official name. Today, we complete one full year since ALPN started working, and we thought we'd mark that day by addressing the challenge or the request we most often receive from students of law or professionals who want to transition towards animal law as a career. So we thought we would organize a fireside chat with two experts who've been working in this field for a while to talk to you about what a career in animal law looks like. To tell you a little bit about myself, I am a lawyer. I graduated from National Law University, Delhi in 2014. I went on to work as a legal journalist with Mint newspaper, after which I completed my master's with a dissertation on the link between animal rights and religion in India from a legal perspective. After doing my LLM, I prepared for UPSC for a while, after which I joined Vidhi Center for Legal Policy as a research fellow, and I worked there as a legal researcher, um, working on access to justice issues. Last year, I decided I needed to take some time off before starting my journey as a full-time animal lawyer. I've been involved with animal advocacy since I was 12 years old, but I never knew how to use my legal skills to be able to help animals and at a large scale. And we started ALPN simply because of that. We wanted to make a large scale difference using law and policy as a tool, and large scale change to the lives of animals and the people that deal with them. Um, now, So why this event? So ever since I started ALPN and I started talking about it on LinkedIn, I was very frequently contacted by law students who wanted to know more about what animal law is. What is the scope for someone who wants to study, or who wants to pursue animal law and wants to work in this field? So we thought we could have a chat with people who've done this already. There is some information about animal law as a career in different parts of the world, very little information about what animal law um, holds as a field in India. So with that, I just wanted to briefly talk about ALPN. So the organizations whose anniversary we're celebrating today. Now, ALPN is a not-for-profit think tank with a mission to drive legal and policy change in India to improve the lives of animals in a way that it fosters respect for the well-being of humans, the environment, and the animals themselves. Uh, I think in the last 1 year, we've spent a considerable period of time just figuring out how to build an organization that can be impactful and effective in many ways. And in the last year, we've started numerous research projects, and I can talk about them during the course of the conversation. But I think the biggest change that has happened in the last year for ALPN is that we're a team now. I have two wonderful colleagues who are here with us today, Anita and Vaishnavi, who have joined the organization and are helping us achieve our mission. With having said that, I want to introduce you to our wonderful speakers. Uh, we have Aarti Bhavana from Bharat Initiative for Accountability. She's the Director of Corporate Engagement there. And we have Astha Gaur, who is the Senior Policy Specialist Regulatory at Good Food Institute India. So two lawyers doing very different work. And I understand, and I'm sure you're very eager to hear about their experiences. So I will not take too much of the time, and I will move directly into our discussion where they can talk about their journeys, they can talk about their experiences. So I would encourage you to look at this discussion as a conversation between three people who've made it their mission to work in a field that is considered sort of niche, and what their journeys have been like. So I think I'd start by asking both of the panelists, both Aarti and Astha, and Aarti, if you could go first, could you tell us a little bit about your journey and how and why you chose this career path?
Sure, Purva. Thanks. Hi, everyone. It's so lovely to see so many people who have joined in here. I think when I was in law school, there was no question of even thinking about what animal law was. There was absolutely no mention of it, even in the electives that we had. I think the closest you would get to it was probably environmental law. So it's really cool to see a dedicated session being conducted for this. And I think over the last decade that I think nearly a decade now since I've graduated, I've seen a huge change in this space and seeing how there's more and more interest in this area, which is wonderful. So just a quick background about on me. I graduated from National University Delhi in 2015. um, at the time, I had very little idea what I really wanted to do. I started off with in the space of public policy, but that was in the area of internet governance. And the things that I liked, but ultimately I realized that I didn't really care about the subject matter. And that was something that was very, very important to me, that I needed to feel like my work was having some sort of an impact and that it really mattered. So, and I knew early on that I was not cut out to be a corporate lawyer. I was not cut out to live that kind of a life. I was not interested in litigation either. So in law school, you kind of just feel like all doors are closed at that point if you're not interested in these two very, very mainstream paths. So I was lucky to go into research, into public policy, looking at things from a slightly different perspective. I took a bit of a break. It was, I think, after 2 years of working, I took a break. It was supposed to be a gap year, turned into, I think, three, where I didn't have full time employment, but I was kind of just exploring things that I wanted to do. I did some freelance work here and there, and entering into animal law was one of that. So I did a little bit of research work. I helped out with projects, helped some organizations with drafting some petitions, so a little bit on the litigation side. The research part interested me more, looking at drafting a report on animal cruelty and the status of that. After that, though, the biggest shift was the call for applicants for this fellowship known as the Ahimsa Fellowship. There's something that's organized by People for Animals Uttarakhand and Public Policy Foundation. And it has the largest Indian animal organizations who are also part of this. You've got your Mercy for Animals, HSI, all of them are part of this. And the wonderful thing about it is it kind of assumes you know nothing. And in a span of 10 months, 9 to 10 months, they train you on not just what the letter of the law is, not just on what the various and the many, many statutes that apply to animal law, but they also taught us what the ground realities are, how things are to be implemented, how the exact provisions differ in implementation across the country. And it was really surprising to know just what good laws we have and how the biggest issue was implementation, I suppose. So, and we had some incredible mentorship as well from people who have been working in the space for a long time. So I started out, I finished the fellowship, and then I joined People for Animals Policy Foundation, where I worked in the space of farmed animal welfare. I was specifically working on poultry welfare. And after that, I shifted to Bharat Initiative for Accountability. This is a coalition of about 15 Indian animal welfare organizations that specifically look at animal welfare, but from the scope of from the lens of corporate accountability, that there are these large food companies that have animals as part of their supply chain. And as they use animals, they are also responsible for the welfare of these animals. It can't just be profit over welfare every time. So a lot of, I think we'll go into that in more detail later, but I now head the work for the welfare on laying hens specifically, and hens that are used for eggs in India. Over to you, Astha.
Thank you so much, Aarti. That's amazing, and that's a very interesting journey. Thank you for sharing that with us. I will come in with some comments once Astha introduces herself and her journey, talks about her journey as well.
Thank you so much, Apurva and ALPN for having me here. It's such a wonderful thing that you're organizing this. Exactly what Aarti said. When I was back in law school, I loved animals, had no idea what animal laws were like in India, had no idea what I could do in that particular sector. So this is great that there is so much conversation around how lawyers can be advocates for animals and their rights and welfare initiatives. And that's wonderful. For me, my journey to get to GFI India, where I work in the policy team, was a process, but also an absolute stroke of luck that I landed at GFI. A lot about being at the right place at the right time. I was attending a conference where I heard two excellent speakers from GFI India speak about the corporate side of it, as well as the science aspect of alternative proteins, or smart proteins, as we call them in India. And literally the next day, I heard about an opening. And while it meant starting from scratch, I applied for it. I took it as a sign, applied for it, got it somehow. And here I am, I think almost 3 years at GFI India now. Prior to joining GFI, I was working with commercial laws as a litigation lawyer, not something that is super relevant to the work that I currently do at GFI India. But as lawyers, we are taught some fundamental skills that come in handy wherever we go. And I'm sure both of you would agree with that. Be it interpretation of legislations, rules and regulations, reading new acts and picking up nuances through research. These are the core skills that every lawyer has. And so that's just been my journey. And all of this happened while I was on a sabbatical. And prior to that, I was working as a senior associate at a law firm in Mumbai, working in the commercial litigation aspect of it.
Amazing. Very different journeys, right? I think Aarti was very clear that corporate law and litigation was just not for her. And with you, it's your interest in science and regulation that brought you to GFI. And I think a little bit of chance, right? I think chance has played a very, very crucial role in my life, because I think the opportunities and the kind of guidance we had when we first started out. So I started law school 15 years ago, in 2009. And back then, I still remember when we were being taught the Prevention of Cruelty to Animals Act in our environmental law class. Um, our environmental law professor said, "Oh, this is just a fad. It's just something that's part of our curriculum that we have to cover. It's not important." Um, and I still remember feeling slightly disgruntled and wondering what the possibilities had. And I think having a guide during my master's who allowed me to explore animal law and religion from a legal perspective, exploring these conflicts really made a difference. Had I had any other guide who would have discouraged me from spending a year of my life researching this issue, I would have probably not explored animal law as much. And I've posted about this on LinkedIn. I think when I had decided that UPSC was no longer for me, and I wanted to move on, uh, I knew I had to do something in animal law. I did two things. The second thing I haven't posted about yet. The first thing was I cold emailed everybody I found. I just Googled animal law world. Okay, so animal law France, animal law US, and any email IDs I could find of professors, I emailed everybody. And I applied for a PhD to the University of Helsinki, a PhD in animal law. I didn't get through that, but the Harvard Animal Law and Policy program responded to my cold email, and I got to be on a project with them. And that's where I met my mentor, who gave me the first structured guidance about how I could build a career in this field, who made me realize that there was a career in this field if you wanted to make one for yourself. And it didn't mean that you would have to be financially ruined if you wanted a career in this field, which is also a suspicion that most people have, and a very, very legitimate concern that this, that it's something charitable, that it's not a career, it's a cause alone. And I think that's something we're trying to change with Animal Law and Policy Network in of whatever limited that perception. Animal law can be a career. And I think That's something we hope to um, make possible for more people as we grow into a bigger organization. Now, another thing that I wanted to ask you was, since you both are doing very diverse things, what are, so I do research and policy work, but more about conceptualizing what policies should look like rather than their implementation work. Astha, you work on regulatory issues. Aarti, you doing corporate engagement work. So, what are all the various possibilities that are there for someone interested in this field? Uh, so, let's say someone is not interested in the regulatory side, or someone's not interested in corporate governance accountability. What are the various options, according to you, that they can pursue if they want to? Astha, would you want to take that first?
Sure, sure, Apurva. I think between you and Aarti, you both have tried so many things that everyone can just kind of make a list and try all of that. And one of the things are bound to work for you. I will probably touch upon a couple of things that both you and Aarti have dabbled with and decided that's not for you and moved on. But one primary thing that, if I could highlight that, is whichever career path you pick, we pick in general, we bring our core belief system to it. And either consciously or subconsciously, our core belief system impacts the projects we willingly pick, or the decisions we make, or the outcomes we desire from it. And I think the most impactful thing for all animal rights and welfare advocates is to find their interest and skill set and analyze how their core belief system of having animals live a life free of pain and suffering aligns with the profession that they pick. Currently, I feel that there are so many professions where animal law can be made a part of the discussion. And if that's the perspective people take, a lot of things would change. And I'm sure Aarti will speak more of that, particularly from the corporate angle. But I mean, there are so many ways. I usually see law students pick up either litigation or policy advocacy, and both of them are big brackets within themselves. I want to speak of specialized advocacy and reform legislature, which is so policy work, legislative advocacy, and litigation, formulation of policies, development of legislation, and litigation. They're all closely related activities, and there's a chain to it. For example, policies are the general plans or courses of action that are outlined by the governments, political parties, etc., which then are intended to shape, influence, and determine decisions and actions. The policies of local and national governments set the direction and parameters for the formulation of laws, governmental programs, even budgets and funding, and the grants that come across as well. And ultimately, litigation is the process of using the legal system to make claims and seek administrative or judicial decision to help clarify or modify laws and processes. Um, Animal rights or welfare initiatives and ideologies can be applied to each of these steps, right? If I were to speak in general terms, where policies are developed within a certain framework where animal welfare perspective is taken to further animal rights initiatives as well, it is more likely that corresponding laws would also protect and fulfill animal rights. And as a result, the need for litigation might be less, or litigation would be less drawn because there are clear laws and policies that set the intent of the legislature. What I'm trying to say is that when you pick a career, you could either work in policy advocacy, you could work within as a part of system. I think Apurva mentioned she was preparing for UPSC as well. You could be a part of the system, or you could also work in litigation. And to undertake active policy advocacy, we also require data sets, which particularly right now are not easily available. There are organizations that actively undertake primary and secondary research to build these data sets. We need them when we are going either for litigation or policy advocacy. For both of them, to substantiate all your arguments, numbers are what is required. And you could also work to generate that data as well. A lot of policy research organizations actively work on that to generate that data, which they then use for their policy advocacy. But you could also work independently to do that, to understand what the market is like, for example, whether consumers understand the difference between plant-based meat labeling and what animal-sourced meat labeling. What kind of consumers are likely to pick up what products? What to tell the companies what their consumer base is like so that they can position their products appropriately. And again, another very good area where I don't see a lot of people going actively is research and teaching. For anyone that is looking to deep dive into animal welfare philosophies, and I particularly really like to read a lot of good papers that keep coming up. There are so many conferences where they are presented as well. There are so many niche areas in animal welfare. For example, vivisection is something that deeply interests me. And particularly in India, it's not spoken about a lot. Because while it is banned for cosmetics, it's not for pharma, for drugs. So there's so many nuances to it. To further build capacity, you could also teach and pass along your knowledge. And then there's the company advisory piece, which we do a lot at GFI. As well, we put out resources that actively help companies by providing 101 knowledge of laws. Because trust me, most startups do not have an in-house lawyer. So what do? They usually come to NGOs. For example, I'm sure, Apurva, you might be, both Apurva and Aarti, you might have come across companies that would want some suggestion on how to position their product, what the claims need to be, what the labeling needs to be, or even if they're setting up a factory, what the compliances need to look like. All of these aspects come within company advisory piece. So best way to do this is to, you might want to approach an NGO that actively supports companies, understand what their legal troubles are. And, for instance, several challenges that plant-based companies face every day. And at GFI, we have also formulated a regulatory advisory council, which is made up of a lot of lawyers. I can go on and on and on about this, but I'm going to pause right here and I'll let Aarti come in because I'm sure she has very valuable inputs.
Thanks, Astha. That's very interesting. And like she mentioned, that I think you can take any area, any topic, and it will intersect with animals in some way or the other. In fact, when I first started with the fellowship, I started to feel a little overwhelmed almost, because you step out of the house, you look at anything, and there is a space where animals are being exploited. You go out for a meal, you see that in the menu. You're on your way, you see meat shops on the side of the road, all of which are illegal. You see unneutered dogs roaming on the road. It's just, you pick up some cosmetics, you think about, okay, forget the testing part, at least is regulated now, but whether they contain animal products or not is involved. It's still something you need to consider. You go to buy some clothes, that's another thing to take into account. You go on a trip, are there any animals involved in the tourism? There's so many things to take into account, because animal exploitation is all pervasive, and correspondingly the scope for impact is also extremely wide reaching. So I think what you kind of need to think about when you're looking at a career in this space is, first, I would say, don't limit yourself. Just because you pick one particular area now does not mean you're married to that for the rest of your life. People move around, then the only true way to know whether something interests you or not is to give it a shot. So you try something, it doesn't work, that's fine. You can move on. There are so many other things for you to try. So you've got your main brackets, of course. And I think for the longest time, when you think about animal law, most people think you would just be a lawyer who practices, who takes on issues of cruelty, for instance. Those would just be a very tiny percentage. Like, I could name maybe on one hand the number of lawyers who would actually be doing that, who are focused on that. In fact, most times in litigation, all these big cases that you hear about, senior counsel are involved in that. They are not the ones who do the research. They are not the ones for whom this is a livelihood. A lot of them devote their time pro bono to this, or they might be funded separately just to take on these cases. But that is such a tiny part of it. I was very clear that I did not want to do litigation. And again, that is such a small part that there's so many other things that are available. So when it comes to policy, like Astha gave a very good, really, really helpful and nuanced explanation of that. But I think you also like what work I do, we classify that as private policy. It's the same thing really as public policy. There are certain laws or policies in place. So that from a public policy lens, that is the statutes that exist, the regulations. From a private policy, it is the values and the promises that companies come out with, because everyone loves to talk about how they care about sustainability and the environment and how they care about ethical sourcing and all of these things. So ultimately what it boils down to is pushing them to actually, walk the talk, to actually implement all their promises. There are pros and cons and good things and bad things in both sides. Like if you're working in public policy, the biggest thing you have on, in your arsenal is, as a citizen of the country, you can just walk into government offices. They have open hours, they have public meeting timings where you can go and meet the right decision makers. You have RTIs where you can actually ask, you have the right to ask for information, you have the right to ask to inspect files, where you can get the information. With private policy, when you're talking to corporations, and these are all the kind of corporations I'm talking about are all Fortune 500 multinational companies. They are huge and they exist around the world. These are like trillion dollar companies that exploit animals as part of their supply chain. Now, this is another thing to consider. Do you want to work in incremental welfare where you're trying to improve the lives of the billions of animals being exploited on an annual basis, on a daily basis, really? Or would you like to work more towards complete abolition? You want, to work towards not using animals at all. And again, I don't think one can exist without the other. I think everyone's long-term goal is that we eventually have a vegan society, or basically one where animals are not exploited, which is essentially what veganism is. That they are not exploited for meat, for clothes, for entertainment, for anything. And I think that's our long-term goal. We all want to live in such a world, but we also know that it'll take several steps to get there. It's not going to happen in my lifetime. I know that for a fact. So in the meantime, what I have dedicated my career towards for now is to help the billions of animals that are currently suffering, and try to make it such that the next batch of animals that are brought into this are not suffering as much. So one huge thing that could pull you towards working in this space is just the scope of impact. Like even if that there are like about what was the latest number? I think I saw yesterday about 92 billion land mammals that are killed for food every year. Any work that you do can have an impact on these many billions of animals, right? In India, of course, and India is like one of the largest countries in terms of exploiting animals, the second largest in egg production, the largest in beef exports. So the scope for impact is huge. So if that's something that is important to you, I think that's a great indicator and a great way to kind of gauge which space you want to go into. A lot of people, when you talk about animal law, they specifically think of just cats and dogs. They think that it's more about the fights that, apartment associations have with the residents, or they have with animal lovers that want to feed dogs in their community. But those are the things, those are the cases that are most reported, I would say, but they form like not even 1% of the issues that we actually want to work on. So when we say, I think farmed animal welfare is something that has huge scope for improvement, huge scope for opportunities as well. Now, when I say farmed animals, I'm talking about animals that are exploited for food, that are reared for food. So it's everything from eggs to dairy to meat, in all the animals that are used over there. So I suppose it all really boils down to what kind of work do you want to do? Are you pulled towards something because of specific animals? Are you pulled to something because of the way that the process that is involved? Because a lot of times you kind of have to see, is it the journey or the end that is more important to you at that point of time? Because a lot of times the individual steps may not be something that you thought you would really be working on. I never for the life of me ever thought I would be contacting companies and asking them information, right? And pushing for accountability and transparency, pushing for how, you know, consumers are becoming more conscious and ethical about their choices, and therefore companies have a duty to make sure that they are providing such options to people. Um, but at the same time, there are lots of people who would like to see that they want to make sure that the individual steps that they're working on help. There's lots of people who, they want to, for example, they help with rescues, they help with immediate cases, and we need all of them. The only way to really help animals is to have people working in all of these areas, and together there is an impact that happens on animals, right? So you could do, now say law is more important to you, practicing actual law. You could be the in-house counsel or the lawyer for particular animal welfare organizations. You may not be within that, you may help them with their cases regarding animal law, or you could also help them with other things like setting up their NGO, getting the necessary funding and the documents that are required for that. Tax law is involved. There's so many aspects that are even within that. So even if you want to help animals, but you kind of want to directly use your training, that's an option. Now, I was never trained formally in law school in animal law. Apurva, in fact, I don't even remember the PCA being discussed in environmental class as well. So, but what really helped was, you kind of just think about that. Okay, that's one thing. Another could be what I do right now is I'm not practicing law, but the legal education helps us so much. I think Astha had mentioned this earlier. You are essentially, what we are trained in is not the law. Law school trains you on how to look up what is relevant, how to research in the correct way, how to read large chunks of data in fairly quickly, being able to summarize large volumes of information. They teach you to write well. All of these are very, very transferable skills and are needed in every aspect. So knowing the law, of course, is extremely important. So, when and everyone who works in this space will need to know the law. It's just our lives are so much easier. This process is so much easier for us because we don't need someone to break it down for us. We know how to read a statute and understand exactly what is being said, right? We can see a judgment and not feel completely overwhelmed by it. So that's extremely important. You don't need to be the one who's going to court. You don't need to be involved in that, but you rely on these. Whether you just, for example, if you're going to a public official's office and you're going and asking them something, you need to be able to say, okay, it's this particular section that I am asking you to implement right now. I'm asking, why is this not being implemented when it is your statutory duty to do so? Other than that, yes. So you can do anything from welfare to helping the legal processes to actively being involved in animal litigation. Like you have your largest landmark cases that are going on. You can choose to go into it from a public policy lens of implementing existing laws, trying to see that the various mechanisms that have been provided by law are actually being implemented. And I want to reiterate just how expansive and just how large animal laws in India are, because that's something we don't really think about. We think about that no more 50. We think about how animal cruelty is only punishable by 50 rupees, which it's horrendous that a punishment from 1860 is still valid today in 2024. But at the same time, the rest of the laws that we have, it's incredible. You try to look at the laws that are there in other countries, and it's nowhere close to what we have here. It's more now a question of implementing things. Refining things, yes. Asking for more, sure, because of course, we need improvement. But there is so much that exists already on paper that we need people to head towards. You want to help a little bit, try to join your district's SPCA. That's the Society for Prevention of Cruelty to Animals. They always need people who know the law, who can help out with reading data, who can read literature and can assist. And you can join them. You can apply at your local animal husbandry department office, and you can do that. So education, like Astha said, you can help train not just students, but if you get involved with animal organizations, you can also be involved in running the sensitization and awareness programs for government officials. Like that's something that I have been involved in as well, because they don't know the law. When we talk about animal law, we're not just talking about PCA. We're also talking about the allied rules that have come under the PCA, which you got like some 10, 15 additional statutes. You're talking about all the other things that can be applied. When we talk about animal law, we don't want to be limited or restricted by just animal law, but all the other laws that can help us help animals. We've got environmental law, we've got food safety laws, You've got public nuisance laws. You see, there is a dairy in your neighborhood that emits, that has dung lying everywhere, that creates a smell, that has cows just roaming the streets. Those are all things that you can use public nuisance as a way to kind of get after them. There are so many different avenues, and having like a good well-rounded understanding of the space would be really, really helpful.
Thank you so much for that, Aarti. I think you made both of you made some really interesting points, and just wanted to touch upon some of these points before uh, before moving on to talking about how do we really start. So that these are the options, right? There's an abundance of options, whether you want to litigate. If you don't want to litigate, you can go into the policy space or the research regulatory space. If you don't want to do that, you have different bodies like the state animal welfare boards. You have the Animal Welfare Board of India. You have district societies for prevention of cruelty to animals act, cruelty to animals. So you have all of these options. Then you have teaching, which I think is remarkably effective in the kind of impact it can have on the future generations. So there are all of these options. And even if you don't want to make animal law the sole part of your career, there's always little things you can do to help. And I think that's what brings us back to Astha's point of view, right? No matter what you do, as long if this is an issue you've decided, this is a cause you care about, you will bring that thought process and that uh, point of view to whatever you do. Um, so I think also I think another thing Aarti you touched upon was just the scale of animal suffering in India. I think uh, a lot of us like to believe that we are uh, a country where animals are happy and everything is okay. That hens are being raised in the backyards and there's a small number of hens and everything is, the animals are happy, the farmers are happy. And all of us, at least who are working in this space, know how far that is from reality. So I think uh, an understanding of just how, and I think when I first started preparing a scoping report for ALPN, I always had an idea, but looking at the red meat manual that the government of India comes out with, and looking at so many other uh, just statistics when it comes to how much of animal products we produce as a country and consume as well. It just makes you wonder what is the condition of these animals. And when you look at the videos, when you look at some of these farms, when you visit the farms, you realize that the picture that's been painted for us is very different from reality. That was one thing I think I wanted to flag, that I think a lot of us are just sort of oblivious about the scale of the problem in India. We think that since we're a developing country, um, the problem is factory farming is not a reality in India. There is no factory farming, which is slightly or extremely far from reality in a lot of ways. I think the other thing that you mentioned was with respect to farmed animals. I understand that a lot of attention and a lot of time is spent, a lot of resources are actually spent not on farmed animals, uh, you know, and they're spent more on companion animals like cats or dogs. But I think all of our journeys somewhere in this movement have begun there, and we've gone on to a point. I remember my activism in college was related to making sure that our college administration does not evict the stray dogs on campus. And we would start these petitions, and there'd be a bunch of us sitting outside the vice chancellor's office day in, day out, uh, just asking saying that a law university was not allowed to do illegal things. And that's because we had the law on our side. Someone had gone to court and got the order that, and no, the ABC rules. We had ABC rules on our side, which said that dogs could not be relocated. So had that law not been on our side, and then there were, of course, numerous orders, court orders that said you couldn't relocate dogs. So I think a lot of us enter this space because we care about dogs and cats. And then we slowly realize that there isn't that much of a difference between the animals we do care about and the animals we choose to ignore very conveniently. But and I think another thing that you touched upon, Aarti, that I found very interesting was I think all of us have a choice whether we want to work incrementally to improve animal welfare, or do we want to go for a rights-based approach, where so you have organizations like the late Stephen Weiss's Non-Human Rights Project, which is trying to achieve personhood for animals in courts in the US. So if you've heard about Happy case, there's an elephant in the Bronx Zoo in New York that is that they've lost the case for Happy one in at least the lower courts, trying to get personhood. This animal is confined, even though elephants are social animals, this one is confined all alone in a zoo, and her name seems to be an oxymoron for her. So there are those kind of efforts that are taking place, but I think and then there are there's the welfarist regime, right, where we believe that any improvement right now that can help us get to a point where there is no animal suffering is helpful. It is needed. So, and I think we all have to decide whether what you know, do the means matter, or does the end matter for us? I have come to the conclusion that the animals don't really care how their suffering was alleviated. So whether it was done by by relying on different approaches. So there's a lot of focus on intersectionality, and we'll talk about this a little later as well. There are, and Aarti, you alluded to this, like, animal law is not just PCA. There's environmental law, there's public health law, there's food safety laws. There's so much more to it. There's labor law. There's so much more to it than just the PCA. But a lot of people feel like that's a dilution of the idea of animal rights. Like, why can't we fight for animals for their own sake? And my response is always, I don't think the animals care why they were spared the suffering. Whether it was on public health reasons, or whether it was for the environmental reasons. I think as long as you can prevent suffering for animals, that's what really matters. Now, having said that, let's say I am a law student. I'm in second, third year. Also, just wanted to add, if you want, you could, this is for the audience, you could please put your questions in the Q&A section, and we'll take them towards the end of our conversation. Yeah. So I was saying that I'm a law student of third year, fourth year, and that's the request I mostly get on LinkedIn. Like, hi, I really care about animals, and I don't know what to do. I don't know where to start. So what advice would you have for them? Aarti, if you want to go first. So how do you start? Maybe you're about to graduate law school and you want to know what to do. You just know that you want a career in this field. But how do you break into this field essentially?
There are multiple options you have. I think an easy one would be identify a animal welfare organization in your city or wherever you're planning to be, and maybe do a 1-month internship with them. Just start out to understand how things work. Maybe that will not be the kind of work you want to do. That doesn't matter. At least you'll get an idea, and you can start eliminating things, right? There's another, like what I had mentioned earlier, the Ahimsa Fellowship, which was I see right now, I think the 4th cohort just started. So it's been going on for now. This is the 4th year, and they take 20 to 40 fellows each year, and they train them, and they kind of give you. I think that's like the easiest in. They kind of like just they at the end of the year you are completely trained, and all organizations that need people who can hit the ground running are available. Even if you don't want to do a proper internship, you can speak to activists or people who are working in the space in your city and understand a little bit more. Maybe they need some help with a particular situation, and that's something you could do. On your own, I think Apoorva has had incredible, like it was incredibly lucky as well as incredibly smart to just reach out to people, like just cold emailing them. And it was great that she didn't just restrict herself to India. That she looked all over the world, because yeah, why restrict yourself? If you want to do something on research, then do that. Read up more. I find that also very, very fascinating, because there's so much to think about in this space. The philosophy that goes into this, the various approaches, how we think about animals, like what Apurva mentioned with Happy, the elephant. There, the idea was very much that they don't want to help that particular elephant. There, I'm sure there would be ways to get the elephant out and into a sanctuary that could work immediately. But what they want to do is establish a precedent based on something that recognizes personhood, that recognizes an animal as an individual with autonomy and needs and desires that need to be fulfilled. So that is something that, that they're very, very particular about. You would write to an organization that's based outside as well. Offer your assistance with research. I think for a lot of us, things started with research. As a law student, you can do an after law school, after school internship. You can be remote, just spend a few hours at the end of each day, maybe a day over the weekends, that assisting. Once you get your foot in the door, you start to, then you can speak to people and understand the various opportunities that are available and what resonates with you. Yeah, I think broadly those are the things that I can think of. Astha, if you have anything more.
I think, Aarti, broadly, you covered pretty much everything. And to echo what has already been discussed and what Aarti just spoke about as well, your skill sets are completely transferable. That something we have spoken about already a couple of times. So feel free to not just restrict yourself to finding a policy team to perhaps intern with. You could just literally pick up anything. You could start, as Aarti mentioned, you could start reading, start understanding more about what animal rights and animal welfare philosophies are. And I think Aarti highlighted animal rights versus animal welfare. Please go ahead and Google that, understand what the distinction is, try and understand what you think is more favorable for animals, form your own opinions. That in turn would help you understand what you would be more interested in. Secondly, when you're interning, I think just as Apurva did, reach out to people. Everyone's here willing to help. You could pick literally any field. For example, if you're a fourth year law student and you've picked tax as one of your subjects, reach out to any NGO that is working in policy. For example, within GFI, we know that there are projects on which tax expertise is required because that's something we are actively working towards. There are currently no harmonized nomenclature. There's no HSN code for plant-based protein alternatives, cultivated meat, etc. That makes trade difficult. I'm just kind of citing one little nuance, and there are several of them. So don't overthink. You would find and figure out so much when you intern. Apart from interning, there are so many things that you could do as law students within your law colleges as well. One of them is you could already start on capacity building initiatives, right? You could be that bridge between an NGO that does not have that much capacity to perhaps train and have capacity building workshops, say for police officials within your area. You could also work with NGOs that are planning, that work on TNRs, which is trap, neuter, release projects, if that's what is of interest to you. There are so many wildlife laws, and there are so many, and honestly, there is so much happening on that front that is not being spoken about enough. If wildlife welfare is what interests you, try and understand what is being done there. There are so many technological solutions that are being discovered. For instance, I read a couple of days back that I think it was somewhere in Karnataka. One constant problem that farmers have, and that leads to a lot of conflict between farmers and the wildlife, or even, for example, uh, your your cows and buffaloes as well, is that they come and kind of demolish their farms. There's a lot of crop loss. There's a lot of loss to the economy, and these are farmers, right? So we need to balance interest as well. So how can you contribute? Do you have ideas that could contribute to solving for these challenges? And if you do, what can you do about it? For instance, in this case, the person developed a feature that uses sound and light to scare away the animals. It does not use a barbed wire. It does not use electrocution, does not harm the animals or the farmer. They kind of test that with the farmer and then they implement it. Can't even remember where I read it now. If you Google, I'm sure you'll get it. Um, so these are the kind of solutions that you could come up with if you have a science background, for example, and if you want to work and understand a little bit more about food technology, you could also try and diversify your interests over there, right? If you're somebody who enjoys cooking, who has a science background prior to law, uh, maybe you want to understand a bit about food technology. I know there are courses that provide you degrees in food technology, LLM in food technology, and LLM, something like that. I think it's at Wageningen in the Netherlands, which is an excellent course. So try and understand more, just echoing what Aarti has said, and I'm sure you'll figure something out. At the same time, zero on the challenges that your local community is facing with respect to animal welfare, and try and see if you can come up with a solution and if you can enable that solution in any manner in your own capacity.
Right. Thank you so much, Astha and Aarti. That's actually very helpful. I just wanted to add that one possible avenue for you to sort of take animal welfare or animal advocacy to different fora where it is currently not as mainstream is conferences. So look out for conferences. There are plenty happening on climate change. And if you haven't looked into the link between climate change and livestock production, please do. It is riveting and extremely, extremely worrying, to say the least. Do check out different conferences. So do attend climate conferences where you can present something, you can present this perspective. So there's also this need to sort of take, as Aarti was mentioning, right? It's all interrelated. There are so many intersections. So if you can take, and there's always space. So if there's a constitutional law conference, the Indian Constitution was way ahead of the world when in the 1970s we included a fundamental duty in the Constitution to have compassion for living creatures. I know fundamental duties are not binding, but just as a signal to the society, to the citizens of India, what is their duty. That was a big, big step at the time. No other country had such a provision back then. Um, we have been left behind a little bit. So if constitutional law is your thing, then go bring this perspective. There are journals you can contribute to. I've been asked to review sometimes articles written by students on constitutional animal law in India, or environmental law and animal, the intersection with animal law, wildlife law. So there are so many spaces where you can break in. But I think, I don't remember if it was Aarti or Astha, but there was a reference to this reading, right? There's so much amazing material to read. Um, I recently read this book called The End of Animal Farming by J.C. Rees. It was a very interesting take on how alt proteins and smart proteins, as we'd like to call them, and just these new technologies could end animal farming in the world, uh, say in the span of 100 years. So that is an interesting take. But if you just want to start with some fundamentals, I think, and this was one of the questions I wanted to ask both the panelists as well, and I'll just quickly come to you. But I think if I have to recommend a few books that anyone who wants to start understanding the moral philosophy as well as the legal philosophy behind animal welfare and rights, I would recommend the updated version of Animal Liberation. So, Animal Liberation Now by Peter Singer is a great read. Um, I still remember this one line in the old Animal Liberation book that really changed how I thought about animals. It said, equality does not mean equal treatment for all, it means equal consideration for all. And that's when it hit me. I'm just asking you to consider. I'm asking the world to consider animals. I'm not saying you treat um, a, a dog or a cow and a human in the same way. They are two different individuals. They have different requirements and needs. but you give them equal consideration, is what he talks about. So, Animal Liberation Now by Peter Singer is a great read. The Case for Animal Rights by Tom Regan, another classic, absolute classic. Then there are so many new books. So let us know in the chat or in the Q&A, or if you're interested in a book recommendation list, because we'd be happy to share that with you. I think there's so many interesting approaches that have come out. There's Raphael Fazal's species membership approach, which is captured in his new book. There is Lisa Kurki's approach in his theory of legal personhood. There is the capabilities approach of Martha Nussbaum. So there are these wonderful legal theories about. So if you're a jurisprudence person, animal law is totally for you. And just the theory is fascinating. But again, Aarti, Astha, do you have any recommendations in terms of books people can read to familiarize themselves with issues?
So I would suggest honestly go sometimes on Gestor and just search animal law or animal welfare. And if the little summary or the headline interests you, the title interests you, go ahead. You can start off with articles if a book seems too daunting or it seems like too much. Because sometimes I do that, honestly. I've just been like cultivating a reading basket for a few years now. I think it's more than I will ever be able to finish. But so many things look interesting. So many things look really, really fascinating. And you've got them. Especially since you'll all have access to all the databases, please use them, and you can search for more. You can download pieces like Apurva said. Yes, liberation animal liberation is a big one. There's another one I really like. It's about it's called Animal Welfare and Rights, Existing Debates and the Future Ahead. It's basically a series of essays by edited by Cass Sunstein, who is a well-known philosopher as well. It has what Apurva said about the capabilities approach by Martha Nussbaum. It has so many different things to think about when it comes to animals. Now, I would also say that two things really. One, think about whether, to what degree you want to even delve into the whys, because it kind of helps you understand where you stand on all of these things, right? Because and I think it's also very important because animal exploitation and animal suffering is so normalized at this point that it takes reading a few perspectives or coming across, having some good conversations, kind of shake off a lot of things that we have just internalized and believe to be perfectly okay. For me, like, even though it didn't help me in my in my career, but there's this YouTube, Instagram, whatever, a guy called Ed Winters, who has a very, very reasonable, rational approach in having conversations with people. It's not about lecturing people. It's not about shaming people. Two things I think do not work whatsoever in terms of wanting change and wanting to help animals. But he asked people questions. People who say, I will never be vegan, but there's something wrong about being vegan, and why do you care about animals, and it's the natural order of things, etc., etc. So there's this one sentence that really hit me, and I think that is what really pushed me over the edge to go vegan personally, which is just that is your taste, is the 10 or 15 minutes of pleasure you derive from taste worth their entire lives? And I didn't have an answer. I couldn't find a justification to say yes. Second thing, as you are reading, I think we have all now spent a few years in this space now. So we've kind of figured out our own coping mechanisms. But it's very easy to feel overwhelmed, to feel disillusioned, to feel like it is just so expansive that, if 92 billion animals are being killed just for food in the world, we're not been talking about the other forms of exploitation. What can I do? Or is there even a solution that's there? There is. I know it can seem daunting. It can seem extremely off-putting. Some of the things you may come across in research could be absolutely horrifying in terms of the things that are done to animals. It's important to know, because only when you know can you actually take steps to kind of address them. But at the same time, just remind yourself and don't let yourself kind of get drawn under with the kind of helplessness that a lot of people feel. So just keep that in mind, that yes, there's a lot of exploitation, but there are so many ways to help as well. And another thing I wanted to point out a little, I think it was an earlier point that was made, was just uh, there's a lot about visible cruelty that we all know about. We know about abuse of companion animals. I think we've all had a neighbor who ties up their dogs, or just keeps them in a small kennel all the time and does not give them the opportunity to move or to do anything, or they're treating them cruelly. There's a lot of that you're aware of, but we don't think a lot about invisible forms of cruelty, and the only way to really know that is to read more about it, because that is where more than 90% of animal exploitation occurs. So yeah, go through just Google stuff. There's so much that is available on open source as well. Go through certain large well-known animal welfare groups across the world. Go through their websites, see what are the kind of things that they are engaging in, see if any of those things interest you, and use that. You know how to research, look ahead with that. But yeah, those few things, Apurva, yeah, it'll be great to send everyone a list to.
Right. Astha, anything you'd like to add? Any book recommendations that you might have?
Boy, I think you both have covered pretty much everything. Another one I really like from Peter Singer, and this was my first Peter Singer book, was Famine, Affluence, and Morality, where he starts with that classic jurisprudence example of, I think we studied this in jurisprudence as well in our first year, which was, and how Peter Singer talks about it is there's a pond. You're all dressed up for an interview. It's a really expensive suit, great shoes, very expensive. In the middle of the pond, there's nobody around you. In the middle of the pond, there's a child who's drowning. There's no one around you. There's not enough time to call anyone to save. Would you really care about your, let's put a preposterous sum for the suit and the shoes and the bag that you're carrying, say 50K? Would you care about that 50K outfit that you're wearing while you're trying to go and save the child? Or would you just go and save the child because that is happening right in front of you? And if you don't actively save the child, you're actually letting the child die. And that's how he starts that book. And I was sold. First 10 pages, I was sold. It's a classic jurisprudence example. I believe it's the train example that we study, where there are two trains. One has a bus full of people, one has just one person, and you have to pull the lever. Anyway, I'm pretty sure all law students here would know about that. So that is one that I really like. Two other things that I would recommend is one, engaging with effective altruism. That is a really interesting. And by the way, the conference is happening October next week, probably 19th and 20th.
19th and 20th.
It's happening in Bangalore. So try and read up more about effective altruism. I think that's a wonderful thing you should be reading about, trying to understand what that is. There are so many effective altruism EA organizations that function in India as well. GFI is one of them. And the third thing I do is I've subscribed to some really good newsletter. My favorite is the one by Brooks. They kind of crunch all the developments that are happening in US, and I'm sure you can find this. I know Oxford and Cambridge both have newsletters as well. I think Cambridge has one at least. Really, really good newsletters. They crunch all the developments in like a one-pager, very easy to read format, clickable links, and immediately you'll get to know what is happening where. For example, I recently learned that in the Pacific, because we were talking about personhood, in the Pacific Islands, whales and dolphins were recently given personhood because that's how endangered they are and that's how crucial they are. So, yep, I think everything else that you have recommended is excellent.
Thank you so much, Astha.
Just one
Sorry,
last
Adi.
thing. Do also subscribe to the newsletters from animal organizations. Sometimes they do take, they do provide a lot of interesting information, and you can use that to kind of direct yourselves forward.
And
Right.
sorry, Apurva,
No
so
problem.
sorry to interrupt you again. One last thing is there is an animal law moot court that happens. So if you love mooting, you should definitely look at that and you should definitely participate in that as well. I'm sure Apurva will share all these details.
Yeah, no, WIMLAR is great. I think it's a great initiative, and kudos to Ankita and her team for putting it together. So do check out the World Moot on International Law and Animal Rights. So that's one of the newest things we have that can interest law students. One thing I did want to add is there are a lot of higher education opportunities in animal law now. So till a few years ago, it was only Lewis and Clark that had an animal law LLM and that offered full scholarships for that. And now their animal law LLM is also online. So you can do it over an 18-month period. And they give full scholarships. You don't have to fill out extremely complex forms for that scholarship application. Essentially, every application is considered for scholarship, right? So it is a great opportunity if you're interested. There's the Vermont Law and Graduate School. They also have scholarship opportunities. They have an animal law LLM. To the best of my knowledge, Harvard does not have a specific animal law LLM, but you can specialize in animal law while doing your LLM at Harvard. There are amazing professors like Professor Tristan Stilt at Harvard, who are doing amazing pioneering work in this field. At U Chicago, you have Professor Martha Nussbaum. So there are a lot of opportunities. Yes, there are fewer in India, but I don't know how many of you might be aware, but Nalsar University of Law in Hyderabad has an animal law center. They've had one for a few years, and the Animal Law Center has PG diploma courses in animal law. They, at least as of last year, also had an MA program for people who wanted to specialize in animal law. So there are these lovely, and from time to time, they organize webinars or workshops, etc., that you might want to keep an eye out for. Do follow their Instagram or check out Animal Law Center Nalsar. They do some amazing work. Recently, they organized the Cambridge Center for Animal Rights Law Lecturers Workshop. Basically, they trained a lot of law professors how to teach animal rights law specifically in law schools in India. And this bunch of law professors are now going to different universities and teaching animal rights law to their students. So it's not that animal law is non-existent in India, but there are a lot of good opportunities in other parts of the world as well. So do keep an eye out for them. So if you're someone who's considering a foreign master's, consider specializing in animal law. And there are good scholarship opportunities available there as well. So having said that, yes, Aarti, sorry.
I also wanted to add that when we're talking about international LLMs, other than that, all your major universities across the world have animal law centers. Harvard has one, Yale has one, Oxford, Cambridge, all of them have one. So you can look at whether, they take summer fellows, they have research, visiting scholars who can do something, or you can just write to someone over there and see if you can assist them with something. Subscribe to their newsletters as well, because like Apurva said, a lot of them have these, they may give out free certification courses, like the Lewis and Clark University has a few of those where they just have like a single credit course where you just have to maybe just see a few slides and attend one webinar. They have other webinars and events also that you can join. Some are online, free to attend. Summer schools also, where it's like 2-3 days of online sessions, which is a great way. I mean, all these people who we've been reading their books, I've been in webinars with some of them, and just being able to ask them questions is just incredible. So just keep a ear out, just look up, you'll find lots of information.
Absolutely, Aarti, could not agree with you more. I remember Shreya Padukone, one of my very good friends and someone who used to work at the Animal Law Center, absolutely brilliant person. So Shreya once said that, we have this unique opportunity that most of the people who came up with the theories that we're studying are there. We can talk to them, we can reach out to them. Visa Kurki is there, Peter Singer is there. Unfortunately, we did lose Tom Regan, but Martin Nussbaum is there. All of these brilliant people are around. We can reach out to them, and trust me, most of them are responsive. They may take their time, but mostly people are very nice and very responsive. So, and that's what I think that's a good segue into what I wanted to speak to you both next about. I think it can be very isolating to want to study something as which is considered so niche and with zero scope. That's what my parents told me when I said I want to do my LLM thesis specializing in animal law. So it can feel very lonely. And I think a lot of students uh, in law schools or places where there aren't enough communities of, let's say, vegans or animal lovers or students interested in animal law can feel very isolated. So, how would you suggest people reach out for mentorship? Is LinkedIn a good avenue, or how would you suggest people reach out to find mentors? I was very lucky. I found Jesima, who has just held my finger out throughout all of these years and guided me to where I've managed to stumble upon today. But I was just wondering, how would you recommend people go about it? Uh, Aarti, Astha?
So it's a continuation, I guess, of what we were just discussing. Uh, Email a lot of these big people who need, they will always have something, especially people in academia, they will always have a paper or a book or something they're working on and will need research assistance. Start off with that. It's a great way to, kind of like dip your toe into the space, and it won't be a huge commitment either. And there's something that you're you're definitely trained for. Yeah, just reaching out to people. Instagram might help a little bit. I'm not sure how many. I think internationally a lot of people may be active on LinkedIn. In India, it's a lot more. It's a lot less active. But honestly, you lose nothing by trying. Drop people a message. Um, so between the two, just send out emails also to organizations saying that you're happy to help out with XYZ for so many hours a week or something. So just it's all about reaching out and have more conversations. You will find people who are there. What could also help is if you find other like-minded people in your university, in law school, you can kind of like set up a small group. You can set up an animal welfare student committee or something. As in that position, then you can start reaching out to these well-known people, invite them for a talk. That's something that they do. Like I think NLS has a society, and they would regularly call people. They've had, I think, Stephen Fry has. Why am I saying Stephen Fry? Stephen Wise has come, and you have other big people who are also they are very, very open and willing to discuss these issues, and we all want more people joining this space. So it takes nothing for you to just drop a few lines to people. If it works, then that's great.
Astha, any thoughts?
Sorry, I was replying to one of the questions in the Q&A box. But apart from what we already discussed, I think Slack channels is also another way that is really good. There are quite a few that I have joined. They actively post about if there's any requirement anywhere for a researcher internship, if there's opening anywhere, if there's any call for research papers on animal law, all of that. There are some really good Slack channels that you could join. I know there are WhatsApp groups as well. There's a WhatsApp group for vegan lawyers that I am a part of. Um, all of these are, and by the way, that's how I stumbled upon the GFI opportunity. It was posted in there and then I applied. So clearly they work, and great avenues as well. Yeah, I think that's the only other thing I would suggest. LinkedIn cold DMs also really work. I get a few of them. I always ensure that I reply to all of them. um, you can also just apply for internship if there's an organization that you like the work that they're doing. Just apply for an internship. If and when they open for it, I'm sure they will contact you, because um, free labor is always welcome, because there's a lack of talent, there is a lack of hands and minds, of course, that work on the topics that we are working on. So I think you could literally just try your luck. I'm sure you would find someone. Everyone is keen for more people to join the movement, to be able to contribute, and just take it further from there.
Yeah,
Absolutely,
and I just want to
absolutely.
reiterate what Apurva said earlier. This is not a generally, like, thinking of a career in this space is not you volunteering, is not you giving up any sort of stability. This is a legitimate and a proper career option that is available. So we're obviously not saying that this is going to be near what a corporate job, a corporate law job would pay you, but there is so much that is already available that would let you live comfortably and also, build a proper career helping crores of animals.
Absolutely agree with you, Aarti. When we're talking about community, I found Hive to be exceptionally helpful. Now, Hive does not have as much. I'll ask Anita to share the link to Hive. Hive is a Slack community of farmed animal advocates from across the world. So maybe um, farmed animals are not your thing, area of interest and area that you want to work in. So, and that's okay. But if you are interested in farmed animal welfare, Hive is an amazing community. I joined Hive when ALPN was a week old. And at that point of time, I was lost. I knew I had this idea, but I didn't know how to go about creating an organization. I had no experience with building an organization. Um, and the support that I got from this community was amazing. Yes, there are not as many people from India, but I think the number of people from India is growing. So in this community, there are lots of channels on different issues. So there are channels on alternative proteins. There are channels on policy issues. There's an India specific channel as well. Um, where India specific updates are shared. There's lots of career opportunities that are shared here. And there are lots of conversations that you can have. There's a donor channel, which if you sign up for that channel, it randomly matches you with someone else in the community, and you can set up a call with them within a span of 3 weeks and actually talk to an animal advocate you don't know from where. And it has been one of the most rewarding and the most one of the places where I found the most support, and I felt that I wasn't alone in all of this. Apart from the fact that it provides you a lot of information, I think with Hive, I found my people, so to say, in the sense that, and just as an example, it's not just for emotional support that Hive exists. They do have a mental well-being channel, which is very active and very helpful. But it's not just emotional support they provide. We worked with an organization called User Friendly to design our communication strategy. They helped us pro bono for free. We found them through Hive. We worked with Scarlet Spark to work on organizational focus and organizational structure. We found them through Hive. Again, they help us pro bono. So there are so many of these. We're still working with Culture Canopy to build uh, an organization that cares about its people as much as it cares about animals. And again, we found, and they're helping us pro bono. Jay, shout out to you. Thank you so much. Again, we found that organization through Hive. So I'm not saying everyone has to start their own organization and find all of this support in Hive. I have personally found Hive to be this space which has really, really helped me feel more connected. And we're trying to build something more generic for lawyers in India. So Hive is, of course, farmed animal focused. Whereas we're trying to, at ALPN, our goal is to build a community of lawyers for us to interact. And in our feedback form, we will reach out to you and ask you if you would be interested in joining this community. And if you are, I think that would also help us stay connected and help each other out. So that's one thing I wanted to address. Just very, sorry, is anyone trying to say something? Okay, so I think we have, yes, so I think let's just, we have the few minutes left, and I was wondering if it would be if we could take some of the questions. So, is there? I think there's a question from Raja Manika, and they're asking if there is any government law jobs in animal law field after finishing LLB. To the best of my knowledge, there aren't government jobs, but Aarti, Astha, are you aware of any government jobs in animal law? Not yet, right? Not yet. Okay. So hopefully there will be, but you can work with government institutions. You can be a member of SPCA, or you can be find out how you can be more involved in your state animal welfare board activities. So there are all of these opportunities, but yes, to the best of our knowledge, there aren't any government jobs. Um, um, okay. So someone is asking, they have just graduated law with a BBA LLB, and they are practicing in the High Court of Kerala and lower courts, and what they should focus on if they want to have, help animals. So, Aarti, would you want to take that?
So you can, I think, first see if there are any ongoing cases or upcoming cases that you would like to help out on. You can, if you work in the space, you can also tie up with some NGOs in the area who would always need help with the legal processes. Like, for example, if they all NGOs will be, will receive several cruelty complaints every single day. Now, if even one of those follows the legal process, it requires a lawyer who can help with, say, for example, what are the case property rules that need to be followed. That when an animal is seized as part of cruelty, there's a very specific procedure that needs to be followed to make sure that custody of the animal is not returned to the abuser or the alleged abuser, but instead the animal is kept in a safe space until the case is ended. All that paperwork, all that documentation is something that we desperately need lawyers to assist with. So, and if you're comfortable in courts, then that's great, because otherwise there are non-lawyers who are trying to kind of figure out all of this. And the more, and the fewer lawyers there are, the fewer the people there are to help with the legal process, and the less inclined people themselves are to follow the letter of the law and the process that has been laid down. And there's like a clear thing that if an animal is seized as cruelty, as a victim of cruelty, the cost for their maintenance on a daily basis needs to be borne by the abuser, the alleged accused. And but who you need to apply for that. The necessary petitions need to be filed in court for that. So we need someone. So that's, I think, a very, very easy thing for you to do. Also, like, maybe if you just choose that, okay, pro bono, you can take on X number of cases at a particular point of time, to whatever degree, whether it's 1, whether it's 10, whether, no matter what, depends on your caseload. And I think, like, just go through the PCA and the allied rules and just see what you can apply.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for that, Aarti. I know we're running out of time, so I will try to take in 2 more questions. The first one from Malika, and I think I can address that. Malika wanted to know how someone with a strong research background in urban planning, but without a law background, how can they have a career in animal welfare or related fields? I think we did discuss, Malika, and I know you joined late. So in the earlier part of the webinar of the chat, we did discuss how any skills you have could be transferable to animal advocacy or or to the animal welfare space. What you could do is join a community. Let's say I mentioned Hive, but there are other communities as well. You would consider being a part of these communities and look out for volunteering opportunities with various animal protection organizations. There are many animal protection organizations who do research work, and not all of them need lawyers. Legal research is just something ALPN specializes in, but not we need general researchers as well. So if research is your forte, then reach out to organizations that come out with research reports and that require research assistance. Just volunteer or offer your skills, and you don't know what might come your way. So law is just one of the fields that is there to help animals. Okay. And I think this is the last question, and I think we can end with this. And I'd like both of you to answer this. How can we strengthen animal welfare laws in India? So Akila wants to know that law is an instrument of social change, but it's not enough, right? So how do we go, how do we go about bringing about social change with regard to animals?
I'd love to answer that, Apurva, and would be very happy for both of you to chime in as well. This is such a great question, honestly, and it brings back to my earlier point that laws are, if you think about how laws are formulated, what are the sources of law, something we learn in the first year. They ultimately come from society. And with respect to that, you're right. But currently, policy is also a source of law. What the government believes to be the priorities and the most core areas and their ideologies also turns into law being formed a certain way. And you would see that with respect to all the laws that have come across, right? Because the current government is very keen to increase ease of doing business, commercial laws have been made very user friendly, if I can put it like that, very company friendly, right? Um, Arbitrations are being promoted more than litigation. So, all of this is because the government has certain priorities and they want laws to support that. Similarly, with respect to animal welfare laws, I believe that policy advocacy has a big role to play. It's very important to kind of convince your policy stakeholders, be it state policy stakeholders, be it central policy stakeholders, that animal welfare laws ties in with their current priorities, and therefore laws have to be such that they prioritize that. If their current priority is, for example, sustainability, then alternative proteins need to be prioritized. There has to be a regulatory framework for cultivated meat to come to the market. As a result, sustainability gets prioritized. If their priority is that human stray dog conflict needs to end, that the number of bites per year, we need to reduce that, then implementation of ABC rules has a huge role to play in that. Current ABC rules, by the way, are excellent, but their implementation is where we are lacking right now. And therefore, what can be done? What can the state, what can the local, your municipal corporation, what can all of them do to make implementation better? So while I agree that laws alone would not change everything, these are such big issues that unless there's a policy push, nothing would change. Unless there's even especially with respect to alternative proteins, I can very confidently say that unless there's a policy push, for example, currently dairy is subsidized. For example, what if pulses were subsidized? What if pulses had the same subsidies? What if they could be used as core ingredients for plant-based milk and dairy and eggs? What if mung bean could create an egg alternative that could then be a part of midday meals? Wouldn't that be amazing? That is not going to come from the society, that is going to come from the policy. So I hope that answers your question, but welcome Apurva and Aarti to add to this.
I think you summed it up. And Aarti, do you have anything summed it up really well? Aarti, do you want to add something?
Yeah, just very quickly, if you want to strengthen the laws, more people need to be aware of the laws. The law cannot just exist on paper, which is what it currently does. So if you see certain instances of, say, write a representation, send a letter to the respective government office, follow that up in a couple of months with an RTI, which will take you little to no time at all. The more conversations you have, the more, say you've seen a case of animal cruelty, don't hesitate to file a complaint over there. You might need that half day that you spend in the police station, but the more people that do that, the more these officials are also they'll also be aware of the laws that exist, and they'll also be aware that this is not something that can just be brushed under the carpet, which is something that happens so often. I mean, I have the number of times police officials and government officials have told me, yeah, but that's just the law, almost like it's, like an optional thing that they can look at. They're, no, let's talk about what we can actually do. Now, the only way that we can really break through that is not by having more laws, not by having even more statutes that people need to go through, but to make sure that the current ones are actually being implemented in every possible way. So reach out, write letters. These are things you can do while sitting at home.
Right. Thank you so much, Aarti. Thank you so much, Astha. I don't know about everyone else, but I have really, really enjoyed this conversation and learning about both your journeys and both your experiences. And thank you so much for taking out the time to be with us today on this very, very special day for us. So thank you so much. We will be reaching out to everybody with a feedback form, and I would really appreciate if you could fill it out so we can improve our future events and we can learn from this experience and tailor them more to your needs. We're also sharing this animal advocacy careers guide with respect to careers in law. So how can animal advocates build with legal expertise have careers in law? This is a brilliant document, and we would really urge you to have a look at it whenever possible, and please go through it. I think the link is there in the chat. So please use this very effectively. And yeah, once again, thank you everybody for being here with us. And thank you so much for helping us almost finish this on time. So thank you so much. Thank you, Astha. Thank you, Aarti. Really
Thanks so much,
appreciate you
Apurva,
being
and
here.
huge congratulations to ALPN on your anniversary.
Thank you so much. Thank you.
Thank you, Apurva. And yes, congratulations, ALPN. This is a
Thank you.
wonderful achievement.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Take care. Bye.